Alright, hey guys, your tired teacher back again, late on a Sunday night. So, we left off in our discussion with part 5 of the Gilded Age, which we include the greater discussion on immigration and the growth of cities, which is urbanization. We discussed like the problems in the cities with corruption, with, corruption on the political level, in the local governments, also disease and crime and poverty and like tenement houses, and we even delved into child labor and saw the beginnings of reform with the social gospel movement, the settlement house movement, and things of the sort that middle class reformers would start doing in order to combat against the problems that they saw in the cities during the Gilded Age. So today what we got is actually a bit of a more fun topic. This is what we have on popular culture during the Gilded Age. So this one will probably be kind of short today because there's actually not terribly much that's going on. But we will dive into literature and art and music and architecture and sports. So also other popular culture things like entertainment and the like. So let's go ahead and kick things off by exploring these topics right here. So we're going to be talking about changes in education, we're going to be talking about the literature and the arts, all of that stuff in this first part. So in education, there are some changes that go on that we've seen since, antebellum reform with Horace Mann and his common schools. So, there are some changes to elementary this time with the Gilded Age. There is still an emphasis on teaching 3 R's, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is math, okay? So they're still promoting things from antebellum reform, like the McGuffey readers, standardized texts, things like that. But what's different now is that more and more states are passing laws that are requiring children to attend school. And therefore, the number of students enrolled in school is going to rapidly increase. And because of this one thing, our literacy rate rises to 90% of the population by 1900. We've even adopted things like kindergarten. I mean, this was a concept brought in by German immigrants, and now it's very popular. And of course, in the Gilded Age, it's kind of ironic in a way because we do have rampant child labor going on in the Gilded Age, but we also have a growing interest in early childhood education. So, Alright. Let's go ahead and discuss what's going on at the high school level and the college level, however. So, the lower grades, of course, are supported by, tax money. And as well, the high schools. There was growing support to have tax-based revenue for them as well. These schools are kind of more like private, like academies, like college preparatory stuff, like in private academies, but eventually high schools are going to become more comprehensive and kind of more what they are now. So they're also going to provide vocational training, citizenship education, which, hello, social studies, that's citizenship education. And because more and more young adults and children are going through this educational experience now, by the late 1800s, we've got a boom in college attendance, thanks in part to that Morrill Land Grant Colleges Act in 1862, and then again in 1890. So universities are also going to be founded by some of the wealthy robber barons like Leland Stanford. starts up Stanford University. Carnegie Mellon is started up as well. The University of Chicago, thanks to John D. Rockefeller. There's a lot of universities you guys have probably heard of that had started up in this time. Also, for women are going to have more of a higher educational opportunity as well. We saw this around the Civil War starting to roll out, but there's going to be more of an emphasis on it now. So by the time 1900 comes around, 71% of the colleges are going to admit women. And the women themselves are going to represent a third of the attending students at colleges. So this is incredible for women. Because now with that higher education, they could pursue more professional work. So within the college curriculum though, you're going to see more courses offered for sure. There are going to be more elective courses. And like Harvard, for example, reduces the number of required courses. But some of these elective courses will be chosen by the students, and they're going to be like physics, chemistry, biology, geology, more of the more modern day languages and sciences of that time that were still kind of fairly new and still being explored. Johns Hopkins is going to have advanced graduate studies, emphasis on research and free inquiry. Also, they're going to add social activities. It's not just going to be all education. There's going to be fraternities around now, intercollegiate sports. So all of that is going to be part of the college experience as well. As well as changes to social sciences. This is going to expand greatly. It's not just going to be like your history, your government, economics. Now we're going to include new social sciences like psychology. Because remember, Sigmund Freud is kind of doing his thing around this time. So of course we're going to see that new social science, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and political science. So we've got a couple knowable people with this as well. Richard Ely of Johns Hopkins is going to directly attack laissez-faire economics. And he's going to use economics to go ahead and study labor unions, trusts, and whatnot. And try to suggest some remedies for these problems that we have amongst big business. We also have future President Woodrow Wilson here, who's a political scientist, historians like Frederick Jackson Turner, Lester Ward, who's a leading sociologist of the day. All these people are going to explore, human behavior instead of logical abstraction. So we're expanding social studies and social sciences as well. W.E.B. Du Bois. We had mentioned him briefly, I want to say, with the discussion on the New South. But let's go ahead and talk about him a little more in depth now. He is the first African American to receive a doctorate from Harvard, and he is definitely a leading Black intellectual of the day. So, he is going to be one of the leading figures of the African American community from here on out, and he's going to advocate for the equality for the African American community. He wants integrated schools. He wants the African American community to go ahead and promote the talented 10th. So basically, pretty much the top of the top, right? And he wants more equal access for higher education for these cream of the crop, pretty much. So here's a quote from him. "The Negro race, like all races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. The problem of education, then, among Negroes must first of all deal with the talented 10th. So he wants to break that glass ceiling for them so they can pursue higher education and therefore improve the role of African Americans in society and, of course, strive for greater freedoms and rights. We'll talk about him more when we get to the Progressive Era, because we're going to also talk about Booker T. Washington as well, another prominent leader in the African American community. So, more with changes in social sciences and the professions, we're going to start to see scientific theory and methodology influence doctors, educators, social workers, lawyers. Oliver Wendell Holmes up here is going to argue stuff like law should evolve with the times. So, very progressive thinking right there. Clarence Darrow is a very famous trial lawyer, gets to start around this time. We'll talk more about him when we get to the 1920s with the Scopes trial, but he's going to argue that criminal behavior could be caused by a person's environment and how they grew up. So this is pretty much like modern day criminology right there. So, I mean, we're starting to kind of be more progressive in our thoughts and apply these new social sciences to a variety of professions. Amongst literature, we get realism. And the man who pretty much ushers this in is Mark Twain. So this is kind of like their way of writers and artists, how they respond to industrialization and urban problems of the day. So they want to kind of reflect the realism of the era, not just like paint a pretty picture or, gloss over writing and say, oh yeah, everything's great. No, we explore the underbelly with this. So, post-Civil War, you saw more romantic novels that depicted ideal heroes and heroines, but there's going to be a shift. With this realism, we're going to start depicting life in rough mining camps. Mark Twain with Huckleberry Finn is going to reveal the greed, violence, and racism in American society. And, I mean, we're going to start to not just make America look good, we're going to start to make America look real in a way, okay, where it does have some flaws. So with literature and the arts, with naturalism, it's more on the emotions and the experience that shapes the human experience in general. So we've got a Stephen Crane novel right here, Maggie, A Girl in the Streets, showing off how brutal the urban environment could be and how it destroyed the lives of young people. His more famous novel, Red Badge of Courage, is going to show fear and human nature on the Civil War battlefield. Jack London, with The Call of the Wild, is going to portray, conflict between nature and civilization. And Theodore Dreiser's Chicago girl, Sister Carrie, right here. That's the novel, Sister Carrie. It's a poor working girl in Chicago, and just showing, how rough life was. So, again, literature going more real this time instead of pretty. Same thing could be said about art. American painters responded to this new emphasis on realism. Others still kind of kept it more romantic and popular, like Winslow Homer painting seascapes right there. He rendered nature scenes like matter of fact, like pretty much how you saw them, kind of. Thomas Eakins is like with realism, so he's showing off a surgery right there in this image. And he also did portray a bunch of working class men and women, not just your upper class elites. So he used photography to study human anatomy and therefore bring more of a photorealistic way of painting his images. So more for art at this time. We've got Whistler, whose most famous painting is dubbed Whistler's Mother. It's really called Arrangement in Gray and Black, but it's going to influence more of your modern art that comes around later in the next century. Mary Cassatt right here. She spends a lot of her time in France learning from the Impressionists there. And so she's going to use like pastel colors in her art, portray the bond between mother and daughter, usually in her art. George Bellows, whose paintings are not pictured here, is going to go more poor urban neighborhoods. So, example, we actually do have a painting a bit earlier on, which is this one right here. This is a tenement. That's a George Bellows painting. So you see, kind of looking gritty, kind of looking dirty, but again, realistic. Now, abstract paintings though, these guys weren't really in tune with that yet, so Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, yeah, not quite part of the crowd. But that kind of art, Henri Matisse, and those will be developing soon. So a lot of abstract art, however, will be rejected until the 1950s. So, I mean, yeah, for now we got Impressionism. With architecture, architecture's kind of cool at this time because, I mean, we're dealing with a Romanesque kind of style with some buildings. Like that top one right there by Henry Hobson Richardson, who brings that kind of style to American architecture. But Louis Sullivan, though, Louis Sullivan is going to go straight up with the skyscraper, which is this building that you see on the bottom. He's going to go for the tall steel frame structures, and the first skyscraper is in Chicago. So built in the 1880s and 1890s, these skyscrapers will start to line the skyline in Chicago, New York, Boston, I mean the big cities of the day. And probably one of the coolest architects ever for homes is Frank Lloyd Wright. He gets his start as an employee of Louis Sullivan's in the 1890s, and he's going to do some cool stuff with his architecture. This guy is going to be very organic, which means he works with the natural surroundings. So, here's what we mean by this. Look at that. Dude. You see how the environment just kind of like envelopes around the house, especially with the one on the bottom with the waterfall? That house right there is probably Frank Lloyd Wright's most famous home that he built, which is called Falling Waters. And yeah, it's built on top of a real waterfall. So, it's freaking genius. Genius. Another so cool building that we see at this time is the Flatiron Building in New York City, built by Daniel Burnham. So you see this? Like, people didn't think it was going to stay up. People were like, that thing's going to blow over with like a harsh wind. But the steel frame structure keeps it up today. And really, if you go to Google Maps, guys, and put in Flatiron, New York City, you'll see how crazy this building is, because on either side, here on the left or the right, if you're facing it directly, it looks flat. It looks like it's pancake thin. And people are like, wow, how the hell is it standing up? But, dude, it's still around, and it's one of New York City's most popular and famous buildings. So, more about literature and the arts concerning architecture. Well, we saw Flatiron right there from Daniel Burnham. He's going to use a lot of Greek and Roman influence in his architecture. He uses a lot of historical style as well. Frederick Law Olmsted is going to do more urban planning, like city parks like Central Park, in New York City, the grounds of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. So he's really a landscape architect. But, yeah, he does a lot of like urban landscaping, college campuses, whatnot. So with music, though, shifting gears once more, music is going to be very Americana in a way when you consider the likes of John Philip Sousa. You guys have probably heard some of his famous marches, like Stars and Stripes Forever, and, they're going to be very patriotic and stuff you would hear like in parades and stuff, like the 4th of July, for real. But on the other token, we also have orchestra music popular, opera house music popular. But down south, African Americans are going to start rolling out ragtime and jazz, which is really, really going to influence the cities later on in the 1920s. So we've got artists like Scott Joplin with the Maple Leaf Rag. We have Jelly Roll Morton and Buddy Bolden, who are going to bring about jazz. Also, we've got the blues starting up at this time as well, down south, which is going to be more of your like expressing pain and the darker sides, I suppose, of emotions for the black experience down south. So it's a combination of these three things, jazz, ragtime, and blues, that's going to move to northern cities from the likes of New Orleans. New Orleans is going to be kind of like the hub for music down south amongst the African American community. And then later on, during the 1920s and World War I prior to that, African Americans who move up from the south are going to bring the same style of music to cities like Memphis, St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago, and eventually Harlem in New York City, which will influence music from here on out, guys. So more stuff about city life and popular culture. Let's go ahead and look at print media and advertising, and of course what we do for fun during our leisure time. So print media, we've got the likes of the New York Herald, the New York Journal, which are very, very popular newspapers at the time. And so when we're talking about robber barons as far as print media goes, we're talking William Randolph Hurst and Joseph Pulitzer. These two guys ran the show with the newspapers. So how do you sell more newspapers? You talk about gossip and just a bunch of crap. You sensationalize stories, which is what these two guys were notorious for. Which is kind of ironic because the Pulitzer Prize, which is named after Joseph Pulitzer, is like one of the most distinguished awards a reporter can get for like news journalism and like whatnot. So I find that always kind of hilarious that like the most prestigious prize in journalism is named after a dude who just like had a bunch of like tabloid kind of crap in his newspaper or whatever. So Pulitzer's newspaper is the New York World. William Randolph Hearst is the New York Journal, or New York Herald rather. And yeah, they're gonna just write a bunch of crap, sensationalizing stories with crime, disasters, feature stories on political and economic corruption, scandals, sensationalism, you name it, they're gonna write about it. It's basically like if you guys are watching TMZ or like watching some like gossip channels on YouTube. Bruh. It's the same kind of crap they're going for. But really, where you would see more of the legit journalism of the day was actually magazines. So, magazines are going to mass circulate at this time in the 1880s with McClure's magazine, Ladies' Home Journal, which I believe is still around, and Cosmo. Yeah, that Cosmo that has like quizzes on like horoscope lining up with your love life. Cosmopolitan. The same one. So it gets its start at this time. And I mean, these magazines are popular. But another thing that springs up because of magazines is advertising. Legit advertisement of the day, guys. Yes, the cocaine toothache drops were a thing. And once again, guys, time travel tip. Beware of the pharmaceuticals. Make sure you're not doing cocaine or heroin, like the Bayer aspirin. Oh, Lord. Yeah, Bayer is still a pharmaceutical company today. Let's just say rules and regulations back in the day were kind of relaxed. Coca-Cola was a big-time beverage company back then that got established. You're going to see a lot of brand names that you guys know established during the Gilded Age. Like, Kellogg's with the toasted cornflakes down there. Heinz with their ketchup and, baked beans, I think, in this one. Hershey's with chocolate. Wrigley Spearmint Gum. Chicle. Yeah, it's a thing, guys. It was from back then. Also, you're going to have Jell-O. You're going to have Quaker Oats. You're going to have Campbell's Soup, Dr. Pepper, Lipton Tea. I mean, I'm telling you guys, a lot of brand names started during the Gilded Age. So we're also going to see advertisements for various products like Kodak cameras that are now sold to individuals. And some advertisements that will be very questionable when it comes to things that are deemed harmful now, which is cigarettes. Like the Durham whiffs right here. Yeah, stuff like Coca-Cola is going to be sold for relieving exhaustion. Well, it sure did because they used to have cocaine. Just saying. Another aspect of advertising at this time is some of it's going to appeal to our snobbery, our social status, and just making us look bad about how we look. With advertisements like this one for Pond's facial cream, which is still a brand today. So, we also have new technology developed at this time, like the icebox, which you literally put a big block of ice in there and it cools your food. So think of it as like an old school refrigerator. That's kind of what it is. And of course you'd have to replace the big ice blocks every now and then. So that's a new thing. We also have fashion. This is what you'd be wearing if you identify with being a woman. So yeah, the bustles were in. That's all I gotta say about that. And the corsets. Corsets are a must. So we also have automobiles established at this time, or motor coaches, some people would call them. Oldsmobile came around at this time. Columbia with its electric Victoria Phaeton. And we also see towards the end here we're going to see more automobiles develop. Ford won't come around until the turn of the century, but he is going to popularize obviously the car, right? The automobile. And what's funny is that since all these advertisements are coming up during the Gilded Age, we have a new profession now, which is advertising. So, I mean, yeah, this is kind of like the dawning of the modern era in a way for America. Again, we'll go through another popular culture shift in the 1920s and another one in the 50s and 60s. So, I mean, we're going to start to see a whole bunch of popular culture just roll on out. What we also see as well is how people have fun with amusements. People are going to have fun going to stuff like Vaudeville, which think of this as kind of like America's Got Talent. Just seeing it live all the time, that's Vaudeville, essentially. You got random acts that do acting, singing, tell jokes, whatever acrobatic things, tricks, it just everything, magic. everything. So because of the set work hours that we have this growing leisure time. So now we've got a set work schedule. It's no longer like, hey, let's work from sun up to sundown. It's more like, what are the working hours? Let's have fun afterwards. So another thing that's going to like help amusements grow during this time is improved transportation, so people can easily come back to the city. Advertising is going to promote shows like this as well. And I mean, yeah, instead of like the Puritan work ethic where it's like, oh, all you do is work kind of thing. During this day and age, Victorian values are going to be like a bit more relaxed. They're not going to be like Puritan, like, oh, you're going to waste time playing around kind of thing. People are going to take a different attitude. So all of this recreation is going to come around, but you do still see, the influence of temperance when it comes to like drinking in saloons and whatnot. Theaters are going to be very popular because they're going to have both comedies and dramas. But vaudeville, for sure, drew the largest audiences because, I mean, come on now. Come on, vaudeville is amazing. What you're also going to see is a circus, which P.T. Barnum is going to start up his circus. And he starts off at first with his American Museum, where it features like oddities and whatnot. But yeah, the circus is going to become a thing at this time. And other amusements that we'll see will be stuff like Buffalo Bill's Traveling Wild West show here, where he's bringing in like basically your caricature of the West and showing it to Eastern audiences. So Buffalo Bill, I mean, we remember him from the West and from his role in the Civil War as a scout and also a member of the Pony Express. Yeah, he's gonna totally like bring in this Wild West show and like just dazzle audiences with this. So he brings in people like Sitting Bull, Annie Oakley, and just shows off the West in like its most caricature form. So weekend recreation is going to be helped by the electric streetcar, railroad companies. They're going to keep their cars running on Sundays and in holidays to help aid, the amusement factor. As well, parks are created along the countryside, so even out in the suburbs, you can enjoy, picnics, outdoor recreation, and whatnot. And there's a new industry popping up as well, department stores and chain stores. So Wanamaker's is one of the most famous ones at this time, developed by A.T. Stewart. Big department stores like Macy's are going to come around at this time as well. Montgomery Ward, which some of your parents might remember this, was another big department store. But with Sears, it developed at first as a mail order catalog. Sears is very important because it was basically the Amazon of like the 1800s. You could order anything through its catalog, even houses and like crazy stuff, by mail. And it would be shipped to you via the railroads or actual shipping. So it was freaking cool and innovative back then. As well, you've got Woolworths, which is a dime store, 5-cent and 10-cent store. So think of it more like kind of the likes of like a Target meets like a Walgreens or CVS kind of thing. That's like Woolworths. But the inside of these places, the department stores like Macy's, they're gonna look amazing. I mean, this is what they look like. High freaking class, dude. So, more of a leisure time. Of course, you're gonna go out to the beach. Yeah, you're bringing your ride to the beach right there. And we're also going to see the rise of spectator sports. Like, boxing was popular back then, wrestling was popular back then, but the sport that's going to become the most popular is baseball. Baseball started up prior to the Civil War. It became immensely popular around the time of the Civil War, And straight up into the Gilded Age, it's already going to start up a professional league. So, around 1909 is when the president is going to start to throw out the first ceremonial pitch for every season. But at first, baseball was kind of like inclusive and integrated with the African American populations, but there's going to be this sort of like racist gentleman agreement amongst the owners to no longer admit African American baseball players. So we're going to start to see Jim Crow laws hit and start to see the development of the Negro Leagues. So, but yeah, baseball is totally rolling at this time. It is kind of interesting as well because immigrant populations got really famous during baseball, like professional baseball players and stuff got really famous. So it was a way for immigrants to kind of like rise up the ranks of sports in a way. We also start to see the development of more collegiate sports like football, basketball, which are immensely popular today, right, in the professional form. But it won't be until later in the 1900s when these sports are going to develop their professional leagues, with football in 1920 and subsequently basketball after that. So really, I mean, sports is going to be a thing. People are going to want to participate with them in their spare time, plus watch them. So other sports that people participate in are going to be stuff like tennis, golf, polo, yachting for your rich crowd, and people are actually going to start putting an emphasis on healthy exercise. People are going to be very competitive with recreational activities like croquet and bicycling. Yeah, bicycles. So, I mean, this is pretty much your very, very short discussion on popular culture, guys. I urge you to go ahead and look up some of this stuff, like some of that music, vaudeville clips. The Library of Congress has like vaudeville clips, and some of them were like outrageous. But yeah, so it's your very short discussion on popular culture during the Gilded Age. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Next class, or rather next video, we're going to be talking about Gilded Age politics. So that nasty side to politics during the Gilded Age. Alright guys, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.